channel, The Grim Reader. I am Kathy Grimm, and I am going to tell you about some of the books that I finished. And also I'll just give you an update like I usually do. I feel like we're in the deep days of summer now, and it's this sort of, I'm extremely lazy. For example, the whole habit tracking thing has just gone out the window, so I am being lazy. But then on the other hand, because we're starting a new book in the fall for one of my classes, for one of the teaching classes, or a new textbook, I also am anxious to get on that already. But I can tell that whenever I start working on it, it just sets off my anxiety in such a weird way, because it's all new, uncharted territory, and new uncharted territory for me equals anxiety. I mean, not panic attack bad, but just not good. And so I've had to sort of step back today and said, oh, it's a holiday because it's the 4th of July. And I even made a list for myself. And oh, by the way, since I'm chatting with you guys, so because of one of the books I read, I've been thinking about autism and people on the spectrum and just the spectrum in general. And so on a whim, as one does, I took a test on whether I might be, and it said at the end, there's a very high likelihood that you are autistic. And I just had to chuckle. I don't mind at all being autistic. I mean, I think yeah. OCD, anxiety, I mean, everything kind of ticked off. The only thing where it sort of said, where I didn't think I'm typically autistic, it said, do you prefer nonfiction to fiction? And of course I said, no, I like fiction. But see, I'm one of those autistic people who likes fiction. And I don't want to belittle it at all. It's a serious, there's a lot to be said about it, but I actually do think, I do think that I have those tendencies. And so I'm not sure what I'm going to do about it. Probably nothing, except be okay with making my lists that help me be not anxious and just do things the way I need to do them. For example, another silly example, so I'm taking this trip in December, and one night I couldn't sleep because I had to pack my bag as a test. And I actually did. In the morning I got up, and because I was obsessing about shoes because of my feet issues, and I actually already kind of know exactly what I'm taking, and this trip is in December, but that's fine. And you know what, it kind of quelled my anxiety, and I sort of could move on. Like, I have to sort of work through things, and then I can let them go. I mean, not let them go, but at least be okay with them, put them in their place. And that's how it is with the work too, and especially with a big task that has a lot of steps, it is anxiety inducing. Like, I jump off the deep end into that and make myself anxious about it. So the first one that I won't say a lot about, just because I don't have that much to say about Jane Austen. She's a great writer, but I don't know. I finished listening to Northanger Abbey, and it was good. I think there's some issues with characterization that she gets better at in the end. For example, the resolution with the general, which I won't go into for spoiler reasons, I thought was a little, I guess it kind of made sense, but you can sort of tell, I still think you can tell with Northanger that it's an early Austen. And I think she gets better at the nuances of characterization. And Catherine is a beloved, basic B heroine. She is what she is. And even the romance is kind of weird, where you sort of, that are very 18th century, where she almost breaks the fourth wall of, oh yeah, I know this is a novel, and this is what I'm doing with my characters type thing. And so it's good. But you know what? That's all I have to say about it. It's good. Read Jane Austen. She's great. I don't, like, for example, the depths of adoration that I have for something like Clarissa, which I just thought was amazing. Actually, I do think Clarissa's better. I mean, I hate to say it, but there's more layers. To me, Clarissa's Shakespeare is almost Shakespearean in its greatness. Let's see. I think I should talk a little bit more about this one that I did already mention, because I finished this one a while ago, and this is the one I resisted talking about in depth because Henry James is sort of such an imposing figure. He's also one of these people who, there's been so much written about him that it's almost overwhelming. You feel smothered. This was written in 1896, and I think it's sort of mid-James. It's not late James, it's not early James, and it came after the fact that he, for some reason, this is one thing I don't I'll have to read in the biography of him. He really wanted to be a playwright or be successful on the stage, and he wrote this play called Guy Domville that I don't know much about, but I know it was a flop. And I remember reading somewhere the mean stage director pulled him on stage, and he was booed on stage in England for this play that everyone hated. Now, how humiliating would that be? And so he was, even though he was successful as a writer, and he kept on having to sort of come back and try different things, and he did. So, you know, good for him. So this is, and I do think when you read this, if anyone is interested, it's short. It's a good sort of gateway, James, besides Turn of the Screw, of course. And it is very theatrical in a certain sense, because it's really just focusing on these three people and their interactions. And the plot is very sort of traditional in a certain sense. It's these three people and one lady in particular manipulating the other lady, and that's about it. But what's the weirdness of the novel is his foregrounding of the house and its spoils. To connect the bonding of the two women over the fact that they hate the interior design of one place and they love the interior design of the place that she has. It's so strange, and it sort of, it does speak to something about capitalism, I think, or something about, you know, possessions and objects versus people. And also, of course, you get the sense of, is the son part of the furniture, or, you know, equating people with furniture. The son that, I can't get over how strange the mother-son relationship is, because there seems to be no love lost between them. And it really seems based on the fact that the mother thinks her son is a weakling, is just insignificant. He's an insignificant person. And it's almost as if, so it's sort of one of those issues, you know, I've never been a parent, so how would that be to secretly think your son is less than, or whatever, not and it's hard to sort of clearly discern how realistic she is in her dissing of her son. I mean, it's not that hard. He is a bit of a at least the way he's portrayed. I guess I'm going to go with basic again. He's a basic whatever, you know, he's basic, and she's not, or she prides on herself on not being basic. But what's weird about her is that the only reason she thinks she's not basic, hi Lily, is because of her connoisseurship, the fact that she knows about what are, you know, art, artifacts, treasures, antiques. She has an eye for that kind of thing, and that's what she bases her self-worth on, and not to a small degree, to a very, very large degree, like all of her self-worth. It's almost like, is it Bourdieu, cultural capital? Like, and I think part of my being sort of overly dismissive of that, not to say that I don't like nice things, but I'm sort of interested in the idea of it, but I'm not really interested in being a connoisseur. It's because I have a lot of, you know, other cultural capital because of, you know, education and books and stuff, and that they're better. Just kidding. Or, you know, intellectual property, you know. But I am actually interested in when books talk about things or furniture. Getting back to my favorite novel that one time I might reread. So it is very interesting, and I think that's the most interesting thing about it. Although it is almost like, so the character, so the house and the spoils are a character in this short novel. I just have a few quotes here from the beginning. So the bonding and of sort of Jamesian language, which I haven't really talked much about, which is the best thing ever. This is something from the very beginning when they first bond, the mother and the female friend, the sort of not so well off and somewhat, is she mousy, is she pretty, whatever, the woman that they become friends with, and that it's sort of a triangle with the son, the young woman. They bond intensely because of their shared hatred, this is me, for the interior decor of the son's fiance's family's house. And there's quotes here, the imbecilities of decoration. So the fact that you can see someone's imbecility through how they decorate their house. And of course, there's a big part of me that thinks that's imbecile in and of itself. Or it's classist. It's classist, and it's I don't know, there's something deeply wrong with that worldview. And then another thing is the aesthetic misery of the big commodious house. So aesthetic misery, and the fact that on one of the first pages it says something about her being kept, and she's being kept awake by the wallpaper in her room. The bonding sentence that the woman, the older, and I think the young woman says to the older woman, "Isn't it too dreadful?" And I guess I could sort of see how if you were in a kind of, you're stuck in Trump's place and you're like, oh gosh, look at this. So you could have a bonding there. And the resolution here, it's a little almost gimmicky, I would say, the ending. If you read it, you know what happens. I mean, it's fine. It's a little bit too, it's almost gothic. There's almost like gothic stuff going on here. But the writing is very, very strong. And of course, in terms of plot, what happens is that the young woman realigns herself away from, she's pulled away from the mother towards the son, because he's apparently, he looks like, for lack of a better person, Matthew McFadden from Succession, except, like more of a basic one, like very good looking. He's handsome, and she's attracted to him. And one thing about James, if you read his biography, is it's very interesting in terms of his sexuality and repression. And he had this accident when he was growing up that kind of maybe did something to his parts. Actually, quite a lot of reflection on desire and attraction between all kinds of people in his novels, except it's always very sort of repressed, perhaps. Is that the right word? So it's good. It was a little bit hard to do this, to listen to it. He's just not, I don't think he's the best to listen to because of his sentences being what they are. And of course what happens is the later James gets even more modernist, to the point where, I think I said this before, that some people were like, this is just too much, Henry. You've gone off the deep end. But I'm actually interested in later James too, because that's fine. So that's that. Finished that one. And then let me talk about the other big one that I finished. I mean, big in terms of major work in a certain sense, is the Murnane. It's a short work, 140 pages, Border Districts. And he subtitles it, just to confuse us all, a fiction. I put those question marks in there. Yes, I did mark this up, even though it's a beautiful book. So, thoughts on this book. Strange. He's a very strange writer. He's the one that led me down the autism rabbit hole, because I think, represent. he collects colored pencils. He's obsessed with glass and marbles and a kaleidoscope. He leads a very sort of stripped down existence, because what keeps him going is like being a viewer of his own internal machinations. That is sort of like he's watching his own movie in his mind, and it's a fascinating movie and it sustains him. It may be a strange movie which will involve a lot of racehorses and driving on these flat plains between these towns in the state of Victoria where he lives. But it's what keeps him going, and he likes to report on these internal images. And so this work, or whatever it is, he calls it a report. He says it's not a work of fiction, except on the cover, which it straddles. It's not really a novel. Even if it's fiction, it's not. It has no plot, because it's really just him, or a version of him, let's put it that way, meandering through his internal mind and creating little snippets of narrative connected to memories and mental events, and also with a lot of meta reflection on those things. I just have this one page that it's completely random. He writes here, same small church, the same small church was also the setting many years ago for the mental events that originated while I was reading one of a collection of short stories from a book that I long ago disposed of. Now, even see what he's doing there? So many layers. So it's the setting for mental events. So not actual events, but mental events. I mean, not that they're not actual. But those mental events originated because he was reading some short stories from a book that he's gotten rid of. Of course, and then he says things like, I have forgotten the title of the book and remember nothing of what was in my mind while I read the book, except for a few mental scenes, so to call them. He'll do that a lot. Like he'll say something like, I know nothing about architecture, and then he'll go on to describe something really minute about architecture, like he'll say the opposite almost, which is sort of funny almost. It's one of his tics that he does, and it's very readable, very memorable. But because it's not plot driven at all, it's not exactly what I'm going to go out here on a limb and say it ain't a page turner. Murnane is more meditative. I did like it a lot, but it is very stripped down, and so you have to kind of go with what he's giving you, and that's all you're going to get. So how do personal memories fit into that? Are personal memories fact or fiction? I mean, it has been established, not that he talks about this, that they're very unreliable, and that they're basically you make stuff up. It's more like a puzzle than an actual memory. And so, but that's not really what his theme is at all. And it also has to do with time or temporality, because he's recording them, these what purport to be memories of things that he remembering. And so it's as if, I think that's what he's getting at. It's like, well, they could be fiction. He may be he probably is misremembering, but it's okay. There's still kind of things that he's constructing. It's as if memory is always a construction. And anyway, you could sort of tell it's very circular, it's very kind of meandering. And so I don't think it's for everyone at all. But it's still very interesting and very well done. He has strange writing tics. People talk about his pristine sentences. On the one hand, that's true. On the other hand, he has this tic for, like, I found myself bracketing words that I didn't think were necessary, that he adds to things. And it makes the sort of the idiom sound old-fashioned. Another thing is, this is part of his actual life. This is sort of indicative of what kind of person he is. He says here, he's in his 80s now. He says, I get my news from newspapers. I own no television set or computer. He's never owned a computer. He's done all his typing one finger on a typewriter, all his books. But I brought with me to this house a 25-years old radio that can be used to play audio cassettes. I wrote next to this old school. So he's very disconnected from anything modern. The 50 or more tapes, as I call them, that I recorded during the 4th and 5th decades of my life, when I still believed in the power of music to cause me to see what I had never seen with my eyes. Okay, so memories, or internal thing. The pieces of tape music, so to call it, were only some of many pieces of music that brought to my mind, whenever I heard them, unfolding images of mostly level grassy landscapes. As a young man, I chose to consider the landscapes an actual part of my mind that I might never have discovered had I not heard the pieces of music. See, that's fascinating right there. Like, the music made him see things. It almost led things to sprout in his mind. And actually a lot of times, or quite often, the term synesthesia came up for me. It's almost his obsession with colors, not in a typical synesthesic way, like letters or colors, but for him, certain, even just thinking of colors. And he's part of his obsession with racehorses and jockeys is that the colors represent families. And there's this one passage where the idea that a family is represented by a color gives him pleasure or joy, or it's just very, very, very strange. I've never read anything like it. Very good, but very strange. This is 2017, and he was born 1939. Memories, key motifs, looking at and being fascinated by the way light reflects or shines through panes of stained glass. He has this obsession with stained glass in houses, just like in Australia. But it's connected to his going to a Catholic school too, and churches, and his, all that. But remembering how he does not want to be seen looking at those panes. So he's sort of embarrassed by his desire to stare at them. He doesn't want anyone knowing that he does this. But then finally he fulfills this desire. He goes around his friend's house and takes pictures of the panes, and then looks at the panes on his desk, the pictures of the panes. And has this kind of moment of, finally I get to look at them as much as I want and no one will bother me. We see him turn memories of people into fictional people or characters, and then contemplate their fates, and then he intertwines those characters with his own self or character. And even when he talks about himself, it's always the young man remembering, or the man remembering, which is him. And then a little bit later, the man is just a man in a story, but it's still him remembering. So that kind of thing is going on too. So I wrote here, it's an example of self-mythologizing, which a lot of writers do. I mean, a lot of writers do, but it's sort of like one of his main themes. So that's the other thing I finished. This morning, I finished the first novel in this trilogy of short novels called The Sleepwalkers by Hermann Broch, written in the 30s. And it's 3 kind of character studies, so to speak. And the first one is the romantic, Passenau or the romantic. And his name is Joachim von Passenau. He's a Prussian officer, young officer. And also kind of a triangle story. Interesting. And then the next one's going to be Esch or the Anarchy. So I'm excited for that one. And that takes place in 1903. And the first one was 1888, which, as I recall, is the year of the 3 Kaisers. I think that was... It came up in another novel that I only know as a movie called The Subject, I think by Hermann, Heinrich Mann, the brother of Thomas, which I haven't read, which I have on my shelf, which I should read one day. And then the last one is, what's the last novel? I think it's, the last one is Huguenot or die Sachlichkeit. So Sachlichkeit is this art movement, kind of minimalist, early minimalist, modernism. Sachlichkeit. Sache is the thing, like just the thing, not ornate. So, and that's 1918, so after the war. So 1888 through 1918, written in the 30s. Oh, and then there's a whole bunch of commentaries written by him. Ethical construction of the Sleepwalkers. This was fascinating, and I loved it very much. I loved it so much better than the Musil that I gave up on again. I really liked this one, and it was very strange, though. It's another triangle story with this young man who's involved with 4 people are involved, so it's not triangle, it's a rectangle or square. And so it's Bernhard is this creepy, manipulative fellow, kind of. And what's funny about this novel, I don't think I can remember another novel like this. Is that you get a layer of it. So because it's internalized, so you get what he's thinking about Bernhard, and he's usually thinking negative things about him. He hates him or thinks he's weird. He doesn't like him. But then you see him it is kind of sleepwalker. Like he'll be outwardly, you can get the sense that he's being friendly. Like he say, oh, I said to him, hello, how are you? You're nice to see you. But on the inside, he thinks how much he hates him. Always. Almost every interaction with Bernhard is based on him thinking all these bad things about him or how terrible he is, but then outwardly, and we never really see Bernhard's interiority, and it would actually be kind of interesting to think, well, Bernhard, what does he think of this guy? But it does lead to a weird sensation of everything is a kind of foggy and blurry and not quite clear. And then there are some actual scenes, specifically with his interaction with his actual betrothed, whom he ends up marrying, this upper-class lady. His way of looking at her fills him with dread and fear, and also he's doing the typical, Freudian whatever, she's this angel, she looks like Snow White, she's pure, whatever, blah 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 blah. And then he has this lover who's not all those things, so that kind of complex, which would be kind of annoying if that's all it was. But then he does kind of connect it to these notions of looking at her and seeing her dissolve into a landscape. Like he'll look at her face and think she's mountains. It's a very surreal, almost psychedelic, although, proto. But I really liked that. I really liked that when he did that. It was just so strange and well written. I'm there for that. And it wasn't ever too long. And he comes out of it and he realizes what he's doing. And it was sort of like, he's such a sort of odd... In a certain sense, Joachim is kind of like, he's a little bit like Owen in Spoils. He's also kind of, but it's interesting that we just see his interiority. And that's one thing about Owen that I didn't really say is he's basic, but as our heroine, Fleda, the young woman, who I didn't really talk that much about, she realizes he's not a bad person. He is what he is. He's not really, and what makes him actually perhaps a good person is that he's not manipulative like his terrible mother. Like he has no guile, is that the word? He's sort of, he is what he is, and he likes who he likes, and he thinks he likes Fleda for a while, but he doesn't really. He's sort of superficial in that sense, so in that sense he's kind of basic, and she's not that. But he's also not evil or manipulative, and so there's something to be said for the people who are like that, who are just kind of, they are what they are. And then getting back to Joachim, it's also kind of, it's like the same. He has these ideas, and I think he sees that Bernhard is creepy and manipulative, or at least he sort of is living in a different register, and he plays with them. He plays with people, in that sense manipulative. So he plays with the affections of the woman and with both women, and he is kind of playing with Joachim too. I haven't quite figured out what his real reason for writing these novels. It's some kind of, you know, witnessing the zeitgeist of these eras, I guess. So I basically finished 4 things, which, you know, that you can tell it's summer when I finished 4 things, although I finished this a while ago. So the only new thing that I've started, Snooping still there. The new thing I just started today, and I think I'm going to like it, and I'm not quite sure yet if I'm going to read it or listen. I have both. I have this as one of my Virago collections. I've never read any Elizabeth Murnane, but I do love this cover so much. And there's a part of me that wants to just take time and actually sit here and read it. But then again, there's so many other books I could read, and then I could listen to this and really read something else. There's a couple things on my Kindle that I have maybe that I want to look into. There's also, there's the third, finally finished one of these, the third short novel in the back. So this is the first set of 3 in here, and it's called Backwater. The first, so this is Dorothy Richardson Pilgrimage Part 1. I read Pointed Roofs, which was very good, and then I read the second one was Backwater. I might jump into Honeycomb as well, so maybe read Honeycomb and listen to this one. We shall see. Let me get this all put together. Thank you for the comments. Now, I know I don't get a lot of comments, but I do appreciate the ones that I get, and I also understand why I don't get that many. But I do sort of sometimes toy with the idea of not posting. But then there's also this idea of wanting to get it out, sort of get my thoughts out, however unfinished they are. So it's sort of an interesting way of wanting to connect with the world or interface with the world and with my viewership. So please let me know what you're reading, or if you've read or heard any of these writers. And yeah, I'll see you when I see you. Take care. Oh, sorry about the lighting. Bye.